Alright, so how do you know the behavior around the asymptotes? Alright, so let's say you already found all your x-intercepts and your asymptotes. So you factored the numerator and you got that your x-intercepts were at 0 and 4. And then you factored the denominator and you saw that your vertical asymptotes were at -1 and also x equals 3. And then since the degree of the numerator and the denominator were the same, you could divide the leading coefficients, so like 3 divided by 1, and you get that your horizontal asymptote is at y equals 3. Now, how do you know what the rest of the graph looks like? Alright, so this is when you have to plug in points. So what you do is after you graph all your asymptotes and your x and y intercepts, you plot a point in between every vertical asymptote and the x-intercept. So what I did on the calculator here is I typed in f of x, you can't see it, but it's right there, and then I plugged in -2 because that's the point to the left of this vertical asymptote. And I got that it was 7.2, which means it's above this horizontal asymptote, so that means this whole part of the graph is going to look like that because the graph can cross a horizontal asymptote, but when you go to either extreme, it's not going to. But the graph will get infinitely closer to vertical asymptotes. Then you have to plug in a point in between the vertical asymptote at -1 and the x-intercept, which is why I plugged in -0.5. And we saw that it was negative, which tells us that this part of the graph is going to go down, because it can't possibly go up because there's no other x-intercept, and the graph must cross the x-axis at an x-intercept, or else it's not going to cross the x-axis. Then I plotted another point in between 0 and the x-intercept and the vertical asymptote at 3. And I got 2.25, which means that this whole graph is just going to keep increasing because it can't possibly go down because there's no x-intercept there. So you know it's got to keep going up along the asymptote. But it can cross a horizontal asymptote. It's just when you get to the extremes of the graph, like towards infinity or negative infinity, that is when it's not going to cross it. Then plot a point in between like 3 and 4. So that's what I did. I did -3.5. That should be +3.5. And if you did +3.5, you would get that it's a negative number. So the graph would look like that. But if you plotted something to the right of that x-intercept, you see that it's positive, so it's going to go through and then get infinitely closer to that horizontal asymptote.